Hello, this video is about engagement SEO. This is a huge part of the algorithm. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And I've got several other topics I'm going to talk about related to engagement SEO, ending with my top 3 engagement SEO tips that you can take from this video, especially once you go through the things before it. If you listen to the things before it, the tips will make a lot more sense and you'll be able to get a lot more value out of it. I don't remember how I thought this was relevant to engagement, but I thought it was hilarious. It made me LOL. So let's jump right in. So first of all, Google is watching, and it's not just their Google Maps that is watching in some crazy circumstances. They are going well beyond what I think most people are aware of in terms of they can see most of the traffic that happens on the internet from several angles. First of all, all the big companies are sharing data with each other. Google, even the companies that are somewhat of competitors, and maybe sometimes they're sharing through intermediaries. So a lot of the data out there is getting shared. Also, I just added this data from Google, which is Chrome is the biggest browser that is used by far. So you better believe that they are tracking and watching that data to some degree. So they know most of what's going on the internet, even if it's just direct traffic to a website. There is some that they miss, but in general, they get most of it. So just kind of assume that they're seeing everything that's happening, even if it doesn't go through their search engine. At the same time, they are looking at things on a search by search basis. They're watching how they're categorizing, and they're making different calculations. Even for pretty closely related search phrases, they can have very different engagement metrics. Sometimes with their algorithm doesn't necessarily know that it's closely related, and so there might actually be it's built into where if there's some different intent, even though they seem similar, then they could actually give pretty different results. So they're watching, when someone searches let's see, rubber duckies, and they go down and they click on the first result, they're watching to see how they respond. They're watching to see how long they stay on the site. They're looking to see what they do on the site. Do they go back to the search results? Do they click on another competitor? That's bad for the first person that clicked on, good for the second person if they don't go back to the search results. There's additional factors here, which is search sessions. So do they go and they do a different search? A lot of search sessions involve many searches, so 7 to 10 different searches as the user gets information and clarifies or narrows down the focus of their search, or even broadens it out to kind of attack it from a different angle. All sorts of different things are possible, and they're watching all of this flow, and it's all being integrated into what they're displaying on their algorithm, and what they're displaying on the search results, and also just rankings in general. So they've been doing this for a long time. It was back in 2014. I had been doing some spammy stuff to my Dallas SEO Geek website, and it got penalized, or it was more, it was Penguin, so it got filtered, which isn't the same thing. It wasn't like a manual penalty. It was for these types of search phrases that I had massively over-optimized for. They had filtered me out, and I wasn't on the top 8 pages for any of those, except for one, which I stayed as number 1, which was Dallas SEO Expert. I was number 1 for Dallas SEO Expert. For Dallas SEO Experts, I was 82nd. I want you to really think about what are the implications of that? They're tracking that on when I say on a keyword by keyword basis. I mean, those are so closely related. There's a slight different intent, but how much different? Well, they concluded it was very different because I had done some, and I'm going to mention it down in the tips. Sort of I didn't do it intentionally, not directly intentionally. I mean, I did it intentionally, but I didn't directly mean for this result to happen, and it kind of got a little bit lucky and was fortunate, and as a result, I was able to give them some engagement data that showed them, Dallas SEO Expert, they're just looking for me. That's basically what their algorithm concluded. So I've alluded to algorithm. This is funny. Really, an algorithm is it's just kind of a flow of logic. This is probably the best way to think about it if you don't know what an algorithm, what does it really mean when somebody says the Google algorithm? Well, it's the whole set of logic that they go through. It's not so much the code, even though the code is creating the algorithm. It's the actual logic and flow. So this is huge. The point here is that this is a big part of the algorithm, in that it can have a huge effect on your rankings, your engagement data. Now that said, it's not something, just like other parts of SEO, you can't necessarily lean on it too much. But if you think about like Google, what is their goal when they're providing a searcher with results? What is their goal? What is their service that they're providing? And it's answers, it's satisfaction, it's and a way of that they measure that is engagement. So it's not just do they go to your site? Well, how long do they stay on your site? Do they go to check somebody else? If they go to check somebody else, but they stayed on your site and they engage with a bunch of stuff, well, that still is generally a pretty good thing. I think time on site is a reasonable, very rough metric for engagement. So if you get people to stay longer on your site, that's generally going to be good. It also helps with conversion. So this synergizes with other parts of the business and SEO as well. And there's certain thresholds here. Like, so if you, in the example of Dallas SEO Geek, I had met some threshold to where my engagement was just so much higher than everyone else. It was just way, way higher, where it didn't really matter what they did. On the flip side, like there's probably some floor where if your engagement metrics are just so freaking poor, then there's no way that you can really get up to the top no matter what you do on the other stuff. But this is just kind of algorithms in general. It works a lot of times on thresholds because if you think about it, it's doing it one step at a time, so to speak, and the algorithm arrives at a decision place, and it's checking. Sometimes here where they might check, they might check a number. Is it above this? Is this calculation above this number or below this number? That's why I mean like thresholds. And one of the things that happens with the algorithm, and it's just SEO in general, is that sometimes you really need to work to meet a threshold. That's a hard threshold to meet, but once you meet it, you don't really need to work on that threshold anymore. You need to work on another threshold. And again, I think engagement SEO is kind of part of that. In general, I don't think you start with engagement SEO. There's an exception here. There is, if you do something super viral, like if you had a really good guerrilla marketing viral video that went viral, and it sent a bunch of traffic back to your website, and you didn't do any other SEO, other than maybe like super basic ones, like on super basic on page, then that actually could help you rank. But there's also part of that is that if 10,000 real people go to your website in like 12 hours, there's a reasonable chance that some of them are actually going to do off page for you, right? Maybe some of them are going to own websites, and so you're going to naturally get at some point a certain amount of that kind of popularity, and I think it almost, even without that, I think that this still could have a significant effect. So if you are able to do some sort of other forms of marketing or whatever that makes something go viral, or you could just get like a shitload of real people, then that could flip the switch. But it's not something you really want to depend upon. It's not something from an SEO standpoint that is fundamental to ranking, or at least that I would make fundamental. All right, I want to get a few definitions out of the way. This is actually pretty important. These are some important distinctions. CTR officially, like literally, stands for click through rate. So typically, like one of the contexts where you'd calculate CTR would be is if you'd go to the search results and look at, the number one result gets this amount of clicks, it gets 30%, number two gets 15%, whatever, it depends. But those are click-through rates from that page to the different results. A lot of the times I think there's a CTR manipulation is what I hear a lot of people call, what I think they mean, engagement SEO. But I think it started off as click-through rate manipulation because it used to work really well just to do CTR. Like you just send traffic to Google for your target keyword. You maybe click on your competitors. If you do, you go back and then you click on your site. And so your CTR of that keyword goes up, and Google, that's definitely a ranking factor. Well, now Google, even though they've denied that this is really effective, they have countermeasures for this. So you can't just send traffic that way. There's a whole lot of other things that you need to do to support that data signal as being real and accurate and not fake. because if you just go and you send 1,000 for your target keyword that clicks on your site, all of a sudden that's not going to help you, and it could actually hurt you. It probably will actually, depending on exactly how you do it and the exact scenario. If you already have a pretty popular site and there's some other signals that you can send along the way, then maybe that could make sense. But point here, and I have there's several other definitions that I feel like are could be redefined in the SEO industry, but this is definitely one of it. I think engagement SEO is more on point because it's not just about the click-through rate from Google's search engine. It's also about direct traffic. It's also about referral traffic. It's also about how long did they stay on the site, which pages do they click on, which links do they click on. The links going to your site, do you get traffic through those links? There's all sorts of that. Also branded searches. So what is the CTR? It's not really CTR, even though it kind of is, because that's a signal in and of itself. If you're doing, let's say you did a radio ad for Jimmy John's Plumbing Company, you better believe that there's a lot of people that are just going to go to Google and search Jimmy John's Plumbing Company, right? And that is a good signal. That's a strong signal to Google. These are important distinctions, because I think that if you just use it, oh, this is all just CTR manipulation, I think it creates a disconnect in your brain that I think is potentially a negative understanding, a poor understanding of what's really going on and what's possible, that might actually block you. Integrations. I love Dilbert. So basically, the idea here is that engagement SEO can be integrated into all other parts of SEO. Into Maps. Maps is actually really huge. I'm going to mention a course that leverages engagement in Maps heavily later on in a minute. And Google is tracking to see how people respond to the Maps listings. And also engagement on your site can help your Maps listing, and engagement on your Maps can also potentially help your website as well. With on-page, I think you want to take engagement into consideration. So like the content on the page from a purely technical, non-engagement standpoint, it matters, but there's other things that typically are first, lower hanging fruit. But in terms of, is your market engaging with your content, it does matter a lot, right? So, having the right words on the page, but if it's garbled gibberish, that's not going to really, that it could backfire. Let's just put it that way. And it might not actually help you. It might hurt you. Same thing with off-page. I mentioned before that getting, if you have a link going to your site, it's powerful. It's that much more powerful if real traffic is actually clicking on it, or fake traffic potentially if it's good fake traffic, clicking on it through to your website. That's a strong signal. That's a strong engagement signal. I will say video deserves its own category here, just because it's the most engaging form of content. Google thinks of it as the highest quality content, and Google owns YouTube, and when you put YouTube videos on your website, it helps your website. It also helps the YouTube video. So there's in a lot of markets, this is an extremely valuable thing to do. I mean, who doesn't want to click on this video of puppies and see what happens, see what they do? And yeah, so just video is super engaging. It's kind of the path of least resistance. And Google knows that. Okay, so let's talk about some tools, and explaining in detail exactly what these tools do is well beyond the scope of this video. You could have whole courses on each one of these tools, and each one has its own significant learning curve, and there's definitely going to be a lot more tools out there. So we have bot traffic tools. Dan Anton, I can't remember the name of the tool right now because I haven't used it in a while. He had a tool. It worked at first, sort of, and then I feel like it slowed down because this was very early on. I want to say it came out in 2016. I know Dan Anton. Dan's a great guy, so I was not knocking him at all. Just kind of an old tool, and I don't know. It wasn't working for me. He's not perfect, but he's definitely I would recommend checking it out if you can find that right now. But I don't use it. I've been starting to use CTR Booster a little bit lately. A lot of people really like that. I also have a tool called Viper. It's a little bit easier to use, but a little bit more constrained. And there's a lot of setup here with this. There's a lot, like dealing with proxies and understanding the proxies, and understanding how to send real situations is not a simple thing. Okay, so this is not nearly as trivial as maybe it used to be, but also just as some people might make it out to be. Using these tools is a significant engagement of your business's resources. If you don't have CTR Booster right now and you're like, hey, I just want to pick it up and just try it out. Well, that's not really first of all, it's not going to tell you a whole lot, but it's also, there's a significant commitment to do it right. And almost certainly when you set it up at first, you're going to make a bunch of mistakes. And even with like a really good training, which I'm going to recommend one that will help with CTR Booster, but it won't tell you everything, because I don't think there's a single resource out there that's really going to tell you everything about how to use any of these tools. And like any tool, it depends on how you use it. Somebody can take a tool and do really well with it. Another person can take a tool and totally screw themselves up. Then you can also, this is kind of a tool, maybe it's a little bit mislabeled to call VAs a tool, or what I would call SEO technicians, like in the Philippines. There's a major issue here, though, when you try to use them like this, is that their understanding of footprints just right out of the box is going to be very low, and so they're going to make a ton of mistakes. Expect that that you're going to have to build a lot of systems, a lot of training, and each person's going to need a lot of like kind of one-on-one hands work where you look over their shoulder while they're doing stuff, and you say, "Oh, actually, you made this mistake here. You didn't even know you know it instinctively because you've been around and you kind of understand what Google's looking at. They don't, so you didn't even know to mention it. So it's maybe on you is to some degree, and that's fine. That's just going to happen. So this is again not a small undertaking. And this is proxies. This is a really deep rabbit hole. There's so much technical, really super technical, like how does Google treat IP addresses? How does it track it? How does it use it in their algorithm? So, there's one thing to gather the data. It's another thing to gather it and then run and integrate it into the algorithm. So sometimes they do just the gathering, and then sometimes they actually will run it through the algorithm. Especially, there might be also kind of thresholds where if they're like, it's like a check, they don't use the IP address most of the time, except if there's like something that doesn't smell right to them. And so then they're going to go and check like the IP addresses, and potentially even more. It's not just the IP address. There's other kind of signals that your devices send through, like mobile versus desktop, like Apple, Mac versus PC, or Android versus Mac OS or whatever. And all that stuff is going to come into play, and so again, you gotta be very careful here. It took me a long time I feel like to really even understand what was the difference between proxies and when I was looking at different people selling all sorts of different kinds of proxies. To me, it just was like, I don't know, that doesn't even make sense. Like, I don't know what the difference is. This one costs 10 times as much. Why is it really that much better? This is like a whole training course almost in and of itself to understand that. So again, this is going to be integrated into potentially the VAs and definitely the bots. You're going to have proxies, and you're going to have really good proxies. Probably the single best guiding factor for any sort of tool you use is real situations, and this depends heavily on your niche. Like how plumbing traffic acts is very different than how like a legal traffic is going to act, right? People looking for legal services versus plumbing services, or there's a whole host of different situations, and so there's not a one size fits all here, and that actually brings me to Merlino and Bowser's course. I'm going to put a link to these courses. I think that I don't want to give its name because I'm not sure if they changed it or not, but again, I'll put a link to these two courses. This is a very good high-level understanding of engagement SEO as a whole, even though they don't label it as that. Actually, I get a shout-out in the course because I did call it engagement, and I think Brent Bowser was like, actually, I think that makes sense, as a more clear definition of what it is they're doing, because it goes well, but this course goes well beyond CTR manipulation. It's just the lingo of the industry right now, and I highly recommend it. Again, I'll put a link to this below. I think it's really great for understanding, and then also they do a lot of the understanding, which is really critical, but then they give some quick and easy, like, okay, here's some examples, which is really, really helpful. And they keep it pretty to the point. Like it's not a rambling course like some courses are. So I like that as well. Love Brock. This is 100% maps, but it's not 100% engagement. It's heavily leans on engagement. So there's a lot of cool principles in here, but there's a lot of, this is one of the most like hard hitting, practical. Brock gets to the fucking point and says what you need to know and nothing more, but nothing less, and it's really great. So I heavily recommend it. Both these courses, they kind of come in and out of availability. So, maybe when you click the link, it won't be available. Don't shoot me. Maybe message them and ask them when they're going to open it. That could work. And then, I've got these dots here because there's not really a lot out there that I have seen. So if you see any engagement courses, feel free to Engagement SEO, send me a message or leave a comment. I'd be happy to check any of those out. Here's my a few tips. Okay, I mentioned this kind of before. Don't start with engagement SEO. Again, there are exceptions. It's just you don't get the bang for your buck, like as you would with like doing the on page. If you haven't done any on page, if your home page says home at the top, then doing engagement SEO is not where you should go. It's going to be way too expensive, and it's probably not going to even help you initially. You kind of need to get some amount of data and feedback before you can do that. Not completely true, but mostly true. Give the people what they want. That's what you want to do. You want to give the people what they want. You want to give people the content and the information that they are looking for and that they want to see. And you probably want to do this in video format if you can. Really, this involves knowing your market and your niche really well and knowing what they're looking for so that when they see it, you don't have that long to impress them. So right out of the gate, they're going to be like, oh, this is speaking to me. Also, this helps with if they're going to, it reduces the chances of them going back to the search results and clicking on one of your competitors if you give them a really good answer. But you also don't want to give them fluff. Content just for text purposes can backfire. It potentially give you poor engagement metrics. Then there's offline SEO. This is one of the sneakiest ones, and there's so much possible here. With the Dallas SEO Geek example, what I did was I was at like a networking event, and I'd just gotten to #1 for Dallas SEO Expert. And I went and I told a bunch of people, not just them, but in other places as well. And so a bunch of people searched up Dallas SEO Expert, checking to see if I was there. And then they were looking for me, and they clicked on me and they engaged with me to a much higher level than anyone below me. And so I was locked in place. And that benefit, I still think I'm getting a benefit from that today. Still today, 8 years later, 9 years later. But that was a very rare, it was a rare circumstance that I took advantage of. The good news is that there's a lot of little rare circumstances like that if you're just watching for it and you're aware. You can do it with direct mail or really any other forms of marketing. I gave an example of radio ads, but in direct mail, you can tell them to search your brand name. You could do that. It might be a little bit annoying, but it might actually work really well, just as well as somebody putting it into the browser, depending on the exact market and your brand name and a bunch of other factors. You can do QR codes in public. I haven't done this one personally, but I've seen QR codes on like trucks. Or QR codes in heavy foot traffic areas, especially for like restaurants. That would be really good, or where it makes sense to get a lot of that local traffic. That could be helpful. There's also like old school guerrilla marketing. Just QR codes is kind of an example of that, but just kind of old school type of marketing as well. I guess that's two different ones. Maybe it should be old school here. Like I said, radio ads, TV ads, any sort of classic marketing is going to help with engagement, but there's also, once you know how important engagement is, you can amplify it without really changing. You can put an amplifier on there, but with a few tweaks. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment below, ask a question. I'll do my best to answer it. And like the video if you liked it, subscribe for more videos, and have a great day. Bye.